He thought he was just saving a stranger from a wrecked car on a rainy highway, but the woman he rescued wasn't just anyone. She was the sister of his late wife and a secret millionaire. What happens when the past crashes into the present in the most unexpected way? Rain poured down on the winding mountain road, a persistent storm turning the narrow pass outside the small Oregon town into a dark, dangerous route with a slippery sidewalk. David Harper gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the windshield as the wipers on his old pickup struggled to keep up. He had just finished his last wood delivery for the night to a hardware store and was eager to get home. His son, Eli, only 3 years old, needed his heart medication by 9 p.m. Recently, David had missed too many deadlines. Too many unpaid bills were piling up on the kitchen counter. As the truck turned a blind corner, David's headlights flashed on something that made him feel nauseous. A car was twisted and crushed against a tree, steam rising from the damaged hood. Without thinking, David slammed on the brakes. The truck slid slightly before stopping abruptly on the muddy shoulder. He flung the door open and ran, his shoes splattering mud and puddles. "Hello," he shouted over the pounding rain and the screeching engine. "Is anyone there?" The driver's side was smashed. He returned to the vehicle and saw the passenger door was just a hanging shell on its hinges. Inside, a woman was slumped over the center console. Her blonde hair was matted to her cheek, drenched and stained with blood from a shallow cut at her temple. Her chest rose and fell, but she was unconscious. Hey, can you hear me?" David leaned down, gently shaking her. Her skin was ice cold. No response. With adrenaline coursing through his limbs, he slipped his arms under hers and pulled her from the wreckage. She was light, frail, like a drowned bird. He staggered back to the truck with her in his arms, carefully placing her in the passenger seat and grabbing the emergency blanket from behind the seat. Just as he reached for his phone to call for help, the woman stirred, tilting her head slightly, her lips parting like a whispering horse. "Claire." David froze. Her voice. That name. He turned back to look at her, and in that moment, everything in the world seemed to hold its breath. She blinked at him through the rain-soaked glass, dazed but still alive, and David felt his heart drop to his stomach. This was impossible. It couldn't be. The curve of her jaw, the delicate arch of her brow, her nose, even the faint dimple that appeared as her lips moved again. "Claire," she whispered again, her eyes tightly shut. David stared at her, frozen, his breath caught in his throat. "Because the face you see, that is the face of your wife." But his wife, Lily, had been gone for 2 years. But this woman, this stranger, she looks almost exactly the same. Not quite. Her hair is longer and her voice is raspier, but the resemblance is undeniable. A shiver ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He sat there soaked like a drowned rat, staring at her while the storm raged outside. His hands trembled as he finally picked up the phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I have a car accident victim. She's alive but unconscious. We're about 10 miles east of Millage, right near the main pass. Please send an ambulance." After hanging up, he looked at the woman again. "Claire, who are you?" he thought. "And why do you have my wife's eyes?" He didn't realize he was still staring until her hand twitched beneath the blanket. His fingers instinctively reached out to adjust it, tucking it under her chin. The road outside was completely deserted. For a brief moment, the world had shrunk down to his pickup truck's cabin, the sound of the rain falling steadily, and the mystery of a woman who shouldn't exist. As the red and blue lights began to reflect on the slick pavement in the distance, David couldn't shake the strange feeling pounding in his chest. It was not just fear, not just confusion, but something deeper: recognition, connection, and the first glimmer of a truth he still couldn't name. David gently carried the woman from the truck to the small guest bed in the corner of his humble home. Rainwater dripped from her coat onto the wooden floor, but he barely noticed. His hands were shaking. She had said her name was Claire. Claire. But her face, oh God, her face looked so much like Emily. It was like looking at a ghost that wouldn't disappear. The cheekbones, the curve of her lips, even the faint freckles near her left eyebrow. That resemblance clawed at his chest. Max stood by the kitchen door in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed bunny. his brown eyes wide as he stared at Claire. "Mommy," he whispered. David's heart shattered at the sound. He knelt beside Max. "There's no one here," he gently said, brushing a curl off his son's forehead. "This is Claire. She's just here for a little while." "Okay." Max blinked, unsure. He looked back at Claire. She stirred slightly on the bed, her eyelashes fluttering. "Okay," Max whispered, but his eyes lingered on her. By morning, Claire was sitting at the table, her hair still wet, wearing one of David's old flannel shirts. She gazed out the window as if trying to piece together the fragments of the world. She had no identification, no phone, and couldn't remember where she had been. Just a name and a haunted look that seemed to speak of long roads and heavy burdens. "I can cook," she said softly after a moment of silence. "To repay you for letting me stay. That's the least I can do." David hesitated. "You don't have to do that. I want to," she said. She moved around the kitchen precisely and quietly, opening the cabinets as if she knew what was inside. David watched her chop onions easily and skillfully, cracking eggs into a bowl as if she had done it 1,000 times. The aroma quickly spread throughout the kitchen, hitting him like a punch to the stomach. He recognized that smell. Fried eggs with chives, toast with a bit of garlic butter. This was Emily's favorite breakfast, the dish she made every Sunday morning. Max ran in, drawn by the scent. The boy climbed onto a chair and kicked his little feet under the table. Claire placed a plate in front of him and smiled gently. "Eat up, sweetheart," Max beamed. "Thank you." "Mom." Claire froze. David held his breath. Then she sat down next to the boy, her smile fading slightly, but not disappearing. "It's okay, Max." That night, Max had a nightmare. David rushed in and found the boy sobbing, hugging himself tightly. Claire was there, kneeling by the bed, holding Max in her arms and whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm here." "Don't go," Max cried. "Mom, don't go." At that moment, Claire looked up at David with wide, tear-filled eyes. She gently lifted Max, stroking his hair and whispering those same words once more. "I'm here. I promise." David stood frozen in the doorway, the past and present choking him in the throat. In the dim night light, Claire's face looked like a memory he had never truly forgotten. He turned away before tears spilled over. The next morning, Claire sat by the window again, Max sleeping on her lap, her hand resting protectively on the boy's back, and her face bore the tenderness of someone who had found something she never knew she needed. "I have to leave soon," she said as David walked into the room. "You can stay," he replied too quickly. "Then be more careful, at least until we figure out where he belongs." Claire looked down at Max. "I think a part of me already knows." It had been 2 weeks since the accident, and Claire still hadn't left. Not exactly. She had gone with David to the grocery store, the pharmacy to get medicine for Max, even to the diner in town, where she insisted on helping prepare breakfast in exchange for fresh eggs. But every evening, she returned with them to the small house on the edge of the hill, and every morning she woke up to find Max curled up beside her, as if he had known her his whole life. David observed the connection, this slowly blossoming bond accompanied by a strange pain in his chest. He had stopped correcting Max when the boy called her mom. Claire never encouraged it, but she didn't reject it either. There is something in the way she looks at Max, protective and gentle, that makes David's chest tighten. And then her laughter rang out. It happened one afternoon when Max spilled juice on her lap and burst into tears. Claire picked him up, spinning him in the air while laughing, a sound so full of life and light that David had to look away. Emily used to laugh like that. Not always, but enough for that memory to suddenly echo back. At night, David sat on the porch while Claire cleaned up inside. He lit a cigarette that he rarely smoked, staring at the stars that he could hardly see through the trees, telling himself that this was only temporary, just a woman in need of help, a child filling a void too large to express. But things were no longer that simple. The way Claire smiled when Max brought her wildflowers, the way she cooked soup when David coughed too much, the way she tucked him in when he dozed off on the couch after work. This was not the gesture of a guest. Those were the silent rituals of someone who truly belonged here, One evening at the grocery store, it happened. Claire was near the produce section when a man approached her, tall, well-dressed, and European. David instinctively stopped. They spoke briefly. Claire startled, then cautious. But what impressed David was the French language, fluent and precise. She quickly turned away, brushing past the man with a cold nod, then returned to David with an apple in hand and a slight smile on her lips. He didn't say anything on the drive home, but something had changed. That night, he couldn't sleep. Max unconscious on Claire's lap, both curled up on the couch, Claire's hand lightly resting on Max's back, her chin tilted toward his chest. Her breathing was steady and calm. David walked past them into his bedroom. He opened the nightstand drawer and took out the old photo album he hadn't touched in a year. He flipped to the photo he always paused at. Emily in the kitchen, holding Max when he was just a little boy. Her blonde hair pulled back. She wore a light blue shift dress, her smile wide and genuine. He looked back at the living room. Claire stirred in her sleep, her head resting on Max's shoulder. David brought the photo to the door and held it up, his hand trembling. The resemblance was uncanny, not just the face. It was the way she tilted her head when listening, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed. He slowly lowered the photo. The air grew heavier. David returned to the kitchen table and sat down. The photo set before him. Claire, who are you really, and why does my heart ache when you're near? The evening is so quiet, the stillness only appearing after a long day and an early snowfall. Inside the house, the fire crackles, casting a warm light throughout the living room. Finally, Max drifts off to sleep, lying under a blanket on the couch with a stuffed elephant clutched in one small hand. David sits at the kitchen table, holding a framed photo in his hand. Claire quietly walks in, drying her hands with a towel. She stops when she sees him, sensing the weight in the air. "Claire," David says, his voice low, "I have something I want to show you." She walks slowly towards him. He turns the photo toward her. In the photo, a blonde woman smiles, holding a baby in her arms, her bright eyes and peaceful face. Claire's breath catches in her throat. She stares at the image, her hands trembling as she reaches out for it. "Emily," David says, "that was my wife. She passed away 2 years ago. This photo was taken shortly before Max was born." Claire's knees buckle slightly, and she sits down heavily in the chair opposite him. "She has my face," Claire whispers, "but not just that. The shape of her hands. The way she smiles." David's brow furrows. "I know. You look just like her. That's part of why I feel so conflicted." Claire looks up, her eyes wide. "Her name was Emily." David nods. Claire's fingers tighten around the frame. She gently says, "My name is Claire Dupont. I grew up in Paris. I was adopted by a French couple when I was 6 years old, but I wasn't born there." David leans in with a look of confusion. "I always remember flashes of light." She continues, "A playground, a house with yellow curtains, a girl who looks just like me. My sister. We are twins. One afternoon, I got lost in a crowded market. I never saw her again." She swallows hard, tears streaming down her face. "They told me there were no records, that I might have imagined her, but I never forgot. That's why I came back. I need to know if she is real. I need to find her." David stares at her, his heart pounding in his chest. "She is real," he says, his voice choked. "And she is everything." Claire's tears now flow freely. "And now she's gone," she whispers. "And her voice choked. "I loved her husband." David looks away, his jaw clenched, his hands tightly balled. Claire brought her hand to her mouth. "I don't know. I swear to you, David, if I had known, I would have never let this happen." David slowly stood up and walked toward the window. The snowflakes fell outside, silent and white. "I believe you," he finally said, "but I don't know what to do with all of this." Claire also stood up and took her coat. "I should go," she said softly. This is too much." "Claire," he turned around, but she was already at the door. She paused, her voice trembling. "There were times I thought I had found a family. I thought maybe I belonged somewhere." And then she disappeared, the door creaking softly behind her. David stood still, holding the photograph. His world spun. He hadn't just lost Emily once, he had lost her again. Claire slipped out just before dawn. The morning light barely touched the edge of the curtains in the little house they called home. The night was still, except for her soft footsteps as she gathered a few belongings: an old pair of shoes, a sweater, a picture of Max smiling in her arms. She paused at the coffee table, heart pounding, then placed down a neatly written but shaky note. David, I love you and I love Max. I came here to find family and found two, but I can't stay. I can't replace Emily. She was your wife, your mother, and the foundation you built upon. I thought I could help you heal, but now I fear I will break everything. Please forgive me and always forgive yourself. Claire. She folded the note, placed it on the table, took one last look at the sleeping figures of the father and son, then quietly left through the back door. The morning fog swallowed her silhouette as she walked away. Inside, Max stirred, turning the stuffed elephant in his hands. The boy fully woke up and blinked in confusion. Dad. Mom. David jumped up from the bed, heart racing, and ran into the living room. Max sat on the couch, tears streaming down his face. Next to him was the note, folded like a fragile promise that had shattered. David hugged Max tightly. It's okay, he whispered, although his voice was choked. She had to go, but she loved you. She cared so much for you. Max started to cry, the boy's tears soaking into David's shirt. I want Mom. The boy sobbed. David shook him, feeling pain deeper than any he had ever experienced. Claire had become their world, and now she was gone. He looked at the note, the promise of love and the pain of separation etched in every carefully chosen word. In the emptiness that followed, David realized he had one more task he could not overlook. With trembling hands, he called Dr. Green. A moment of silence. Then a voice rang out. The test results are in. He has a rare genetic disorder. Only one person is a perfect match for the bone marrow transplant. David holds his breath. Who? A woman named Claire Walker. She agreed to be tested, but we don't have her contact information. That name echoed in his mind like thunder. Claire Walker. Who is she? Hey, Claire. He hung up and moved purposefully. He picked up Max again and carried him to the truck in the dark garage. It started to rain. He fastened Max's seatbelt with trembling fingers and sat down the wheel, his heart pounding. He drove through the quiet streets, the lights piercing through the rain. He searched everywhere she might be. Claire's Cafe, the community center, where they used to drink hot chocolate and chat together. But everywhere he only found emptiness. Finally, he made it to the highway and slowed down under a lone streetlight on the old bridge overlooking the river. His phone rang. He glanced down. The screen displayed a message. Meet me at the old bridge. I understand. He didn't reply. He parked a few meters away, leaving the engine idling, then stepped out into the cold night air. The rain felt like a sympathy on his skin as he walked toward the dim light. Under the streetlight, he saw her, Claire Walker, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, her eyes red and puffy. She stood by the railing, her petite figure silhouetted against the vast sky. David, she whispered, her voice choked. He stepped closer, gently cradling Max in his arms. Without saying a word, he handed Max to her. The little boy wrapped his arms around Claire's neck, his eyes wide and searching. She needs me, Claire said, her voice trembling. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked up at David. I thought leaving would protect you and me from guilt, from my mistakes. But he needs you, and her heart broke every mile without him. David's eyes lit up under the light. My heart breaks with every mile without you. David's eyes lit up under the lights. He does that, and so do I. Claire looks at Max, who is huddled close to her, seeking comfort. She closes her eyes and leans on David. I love him, and I still love him. David's knees seemed to buckle under the overwhelming emotions. He looked at her and gently said, You are not replacing Emily. You are giving him life. Now you are a part of our family. She reached out, caressing his cheek. The rain mingled with her tears. I'm sorry, David. I thought running away was the right thing to do. David pulled her and Max into his embrace. The three of them huddled under the streetlight. The rain fell around them like a blessing. gentle and full of promise. He whispered into her hair, "Welcome home." "Claire?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with relief and love. "You won't leave again, and we won't let you go," he said, his voice confident. They stood together in the rain, a family rebuilt under the forgiving sky, bound together by love, sacrifice, and the promise of a second chance. Claire stood by the window of the hospital room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching the streaks of rain imprint on the glass. Max slept on the small hospital bed behind her, his tiny body connected to a monitor beeping steadily. The procedure went well, but the recovery process is a waiting game, a tough game. David quietly walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Chamomile," he said, handing her a cup. The nurse said it helps reduce stress. Claire took it, her hand brushing against his. "Oh God." He smiled weakly. "She has taught Max so much French. I heard him counting to 10 this morning." Claire's lips curved up. "He is so proud of that. She knows." He said he would count in French and make the nurses fall in love with him. David chuckled. He could succeed. "He has dimples." They sat down next to each other, the silence lingering between them, but no longer uncomfortable. Since Claire returned, the walls have begun to crumble. She not only agreed to the organ transplant but also insisted on paying every penny of the costs, transferring money before the doctors could finish explaining. "I can't be away from him," she said when David asked. "It's not about how much he needs me. It's about how much I need him." Max's weeks of treatment created a new rhythm. Claire came every day, reading to him, brushing his hair back from his forehead, singing lullabies in French and English. She brought meals that David had forgotten how to cook long ago, recreating his late wife's recipes with small changes that made them feel fresh. One night, after Max finally fell into a deep sleep, Claire stayed longer than usual. They stood in the kitchen, their hands occasionally brushing against each other while washing and drying the dishes. David carefully observed her. "You have brought life back to this house." Claire looked down. Sometimes he worried. Only because he resembled her did he feel close to his mother again. David set the dishes aside and turned to her. Even more than that. However, there was something in her eyes that still felt distant, guarded. That night, Claire stepped out onto the back porch. David followed. The sky was clear. The faint stars appeared amidst the gentle Oregon night. She held a small photo in her hand, the photo of Emily that David had once shown her. "She has my eyes," Claire said softly, but her eyes were always stronger, braver. "I am the quiet one, the dreamer." David moved closer. "I don't know what she was like at 6 years old. Claire, I only know the woman I married, and I only know the woman standing in front of me right now." Claire turned, her expression unreadable. "Do you love me?" "David." He held his breath. "Yes." She hesitated. "Do you love me because I resemble her, or because I am myself?" David reached out and took her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat steadily and surely. "I love you because you are Claire, not a reflection, not a shadow. You came into my life when I had forgotten how to feel anything other than pain. You brought kindness, warmth, and laughter back to this house. You have healed us, not because you remind us of anyone, but because you feel the pain. I brought kindness, warmth, and laughter back to this home. I healed us, not because I reminded us of someone, but because I am who I am." Claire's throat tightens. "I need to hear that." He gently pulls her into his embrace. "And I need to speak out." They stood there for a long time, tightly wrapped around each other, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees around them. Somewhere inside, Max mumbled in his sleep. As the moon rose higher in the sky, Claire looked up at David. "I've always been searching for a home," she said. "I think I finally found it." David kissed her forehead. "Then stay. Let's build it together." She nodded, the last pieces of fear finally melting away. In the quiet night, their future felt closer, warmer, more possible than ever. The gentle waves lapping at the Oregon coast created the perfect symphony for the late afternoon breeze. Lanterns swayed on the drifting wooden posts, and picnic tables were covered with white cloths and wildflowers. Friends and neighbors from the small town gathered along the beach, barefoot on the sand, laughter echoing amidst the cheers and music. It was not a celebration of a holiday or a milestone marked on the calendar, but of something far more precious. Max, now recovering after weeks, ran around the water's edge, shouting joyfully as a flock of seagulls took to the sky. His cheeks flushed, eyes sparkling. Life had returned to his small body and his world. Claire stood a few steps away from him. She wore a simple white dress that flowed around her knees in the wind. Her long blonde hair was loosely braided, just like she used to braid it when she was little. In her hands was a wooden tray holding berry tarts, her signature dessert, the same one she made on the first night David asked her to cook at his home. That night felt as if it had passed an entire lifetime. David stepped up behind her, gently caressing her back. "He hasn't stopped smiling all day," he said. Claire smiled. "Me too." "Good," David replied softly, "because I have something I want to ask you." Claire turned around, surprised by his suddenly serious tone. David pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. Around them, the sounds of the party faded, as if the world knew to pause and listen. He opening the box to reveal a simple gold ring, inside engraved with the three names, Max, Claire, David. Claire holding her breath. "I know we can never replace what we've lost," David began, his voice steady. Although emotion lingered just beneath the surface, Emily will always be a part of him, a part of Max. But life has given us a second chance. A chance to build something new, not in her shadow, but with the memory of her blessing us. Claire, you are not just a part of our story. You have become its heart. Will you marry me? The silence enveloped the beach in a heartbeat. Claire's eyes sparkled as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Max, catching up, ran toward them with sandy feet and arms wide open to embrace both of them. "Are we getting married?" he asked, grinning widely. David laughed and lifted him up. "We are getting married." Claire pressed her lips to Max's forehead, then to David's cheek, and finally to his lips as the crowd applauded and cheered with joy. That evening, as the sun set low and painted the sky in shades of fire and lavender, David stood near the campfire talking with the gathered guests. "This town," he said, "has supported me when I lost everything. And this woman," he looked at Claire, "has given me the courage to live again." He paused. "Tonight, I want to quietly announce something. Starting this fall, we will establish a scholarship fund for two purposes. Emily Caldwell, who gave me the greatest gift of my life, and Claire Beaumont, who saved him." There was a gasp, followed by tears and applause. David said no more. He didn't need to. Claire looked at him from across the firelight, her hand pressed to her chest. That gesture was so gentle, private, a thank you. As night fell, music filled the air again. Children danced, older couples swayed. David and Claire danced together in a slow waltz on the sand, while Max sat on David's lap and giggled. "Do you think she's watching over us?" Claire asked, her head leaning on David's shoulder. "I know she does," David said. "And I think she's smiling." Claire closed her eyes, letting the wind carry away her last doubts. For the first time, the future felt wide open and completely hers. They did not replace Emily. They honored her. And in doing so, they found a way forward, hand in hand with a boy in the middle, and a love reborn from pain, based on truth and illuminated by the stars over the sea. The morning sunlight streamed through the lace curtain, casting golden light all over the humble kitchen. The aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls filled the air, mingling with the scent of fried eggs and warm toast. Claire stood by the stove, softly humming, her blonde hair loosely tied up. On the kitchen table was Max's lunchbox, neatly arranged with carrot sticks, apple slices, and the boy's favorite peanut butter sandwich cut into perfect heart shapes. Max burst into the room with boundless energy that only a 4-year-old could possess, his backpack slightly askew on his shoulder. "Mom, are we late?" the boy asked, grabbing a roll from the counter. Claire smiled and knelt down to fix the boy's coat zipper. "We won't be late if we leave right now." "Sweetheart, go get your shoes." Max dashed off, leaving a trail of giggles. David leaned against the doorway, still in his flannel shirt and jeans, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The boy watched the scene unfold with quiet awe and contentment. For a moment, he stood completely still, soaking it in. The light, the scents, the sounds of life returning to the home. "I could get used to mornings like this," the boy said. Claire turned to look at him, her face glowing in the light. "You already have." He stepped forward and kissed her forehead. "You know, she used to make cinnamon rolls just like these." Claire nodded. "I know, but they never smelled like this," he added with a wide smile. Claire smiled gently and sincerely, then lowered her eyes, touched to hear her sister mentioned. "She would love you," David said. "She speaks softly, and she will be proud." Claire's gaze meets his. "Sometimes I wonder if she sent me here. Maybe she did." He thinks, perhaps love never dies. Perhaps it waits for the right moment, the right place, and the right person. The front door slams shut, followed by Max's shout, "Put your shoes on. Let's go." Claire giggles and reaches for the keys. David stops her again, holding her hand for a moment longer. "Claire," he says, "I need you to hear this. Love is not about replacing someone. It's about carrying them with you while building something new. You are not her shadow." He takes a deep breath, his voice filled with emotion. "You are the new light in my life." Claire's eyes well up with tears. "But do not fall." She squeezes his hand and smiles. "Come here," she says, and kisses him gently on the cheek. Our little boys have a future to pursue. As they step outside into the morning sunlight, hand in hand, Max bounces ahead, those words lingering in the air like a silent prayer. Love does not replace the past. It redeems the past. This story reminds us that courage often comes not from power or position, but from choosing to stand up for what's right even when the odds are stacked against us. Through moments of doubt, heartbreak, and quiet determination, our main character showed us the strength it takes to protect what matters most. If you found yourself rooting for them, if their resilience stirred something in you, now is the perfect time to show your support. What would you do in their shoes? What advice would you offer them for the road ahead? Let's send them strength and encouragement in the comments. Would you stay silent or speak your truth the way they did? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you believe in the power of everyday heroes, in stories that touch the soul and remind us of our shared humanity, make sure to subscribe to Touching Tales Hub. Your support helps these heartfelt stories reach more people who need them. Leave your message for the character below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because you never know whose life the next story might change.